Media Monitor, the show that monitors and gives analysis of media coverage to some of the leading stories of the week. I am your host, Alicia Jali. We're live on Channel 4 for a very good morning to you. In our lineup today, we start by discussing today's newspaper headlines, including the coverage of the rapid spread of the Ebola pandemic in West Africa and the USA. We scrutinize the media coverage of the Hong Kong protest and the Dalai Lama VISA saga, and we conclude with the Lesotho political situation. Our media analysts today are Mr. Wellington Radu. He's the head of programs for Media Monitoring Africa. Mr. Tebogo Ditshego CEO at Ditshego Media. And finally, joining us from our Cape Town studios, we welcome Ms. Juanita Williams, who is the managing editor from All Africa Global Media. Ms. Juanita, a very warm welcome to all my panelists. Now, later on the show, we will be speaking to Professor Steven Friedman on the line from the Center of Democracy, and Mr. Spector, who is a U.S. diplomat for Africa and East Asia. Now, join the discussion and share your views by calling us on +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, and 714 6857. You can also interact with us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course, like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. Very, very good morning to you. All right, now, before we go into discussion with the stories that made headlines throughout the week, let's first take a look at today's newspaper headlines. Now, panel, if we could first start discussing the story on the City Press, of course, destroy the evidence. Let's start with you, Wellington. A very good morning to you, panel. Let's start with you. What are your views?
Thanks, Alicia. Look, the City Press and the story that we're seeing today is quite an interesting story, and it's a developing story. We have been having that story for over a long period of time. And where we're getting to now is a scenario where it's really crunch time. We have been seeing things that has been happening in Parliament, the commission that's sitting there and people pulling out, and what the opposition parties are actually saying, that they're taking this issue to court. So what we're seeing now is really crunch time, and I'm glad media is really keeping the story on the agenda, and I think those are the things that we should be really doing.
You seem really excited. Tebogo, what are your views on the story?
Well, I think it's quite it's a new angle to the entire saga, and you know, looking at a situation where it's alleged that evidence was destroyed. We don't know, because most of the reports have been made public. Even the spy tapes have been made public, and everybody can view the spy tapes. Nothing was destroyed in that instance. Even the public protector's report and the SIU report. So. It's quite interesting information.
Juanita, in Cape Town, is the spy tape saga making headlines this Sunday?
Yes, it is, and it will continue to. I mean, as was said, it's a developing story, and you know, as more revelations come out and more details come out about what's going on, I think the media have done a really good job from the very beginning in starting off with you know, breaking the story and following it every step of the way. Now,
panel, another interesting one, of course, the Sunday Independent headline there, the bodies are rotting. Very, very shocking story. Your views there, Tebogo?
I think it's quite unfortunate that the bodies are rotting, because even the response and information that we're getting from Nigeria has been coming in way too slow. I think a lot of people's lives could have been saved if there was quicker response, and if assistance could have been sought from South Africa, from a governmental perspective, and in terms of our various organizations that could have assisted. Now you have a situation where bodies are decomposing, and they're using fans to keep them cool as opposed to refrigeration. Now this is a very damning allegation.
Juanita, your views?
Well, the Ebola coverage, I think, as a whole has been, well, I find it slightly problematic. It's been all of the focus has been on what has been going wrong, and admittedly, you know, thousands of people have died, and the world didn't get the world's attention in time for it, you know, to get a concerted effort in going and helping people in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. It looks like Nigeria have really sort of clamped down on the outbreak that happened there. It was very isolated, so it seems like they've made headway. But for me, the media coverage itself has been problematic in terms of, the bodies are rotting. I think that if more help had gone there, as was said as well, if more help had gone there sooner, if more help was asked for, and I think that the Liberian government in particular has been asking for help and over again, and it took a really long time. It took months for the US to step in and to send troops through. They've not sent through doctors and nurses, which is really what is needed.
All right. And what do you think about, of course, the Sunday Times headline, the spy tape NPA boss slide, says Ngoga. Wellington, that one's for you.
Look, this is another interesting story because during the week, the Times Live had on their website all the details of the spy tapes, and anyone could have read them. I went through them. What was not clear for me was how they got them. I mean, we know the DA received the spy tapes, and obviously they got them from there. But it's quite interesting that media is putting all this information out there for people to actually see for themselves. And now we're hearing issues and people coming out and saying so-and-so lied. But it's quite clear from the spy tapes that there is some agenda of some sort that's coming out. And it almost feels like there is a politicization of the country's bureaucracy, which is really not something that we should be looking at and considering, because South Africa is a democracy, and what we need is a scenario where bureaucracy is professionalized. It doesn't need to be politicized.
All right, well, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much, panel. And that's how we wrap, of course, our newspaper segment. We're going to take a very quick ad break. And when we return, we're going to discuss the coverage of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa and the USA. Share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor and like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. We're back right after this. Stay with us.
The Swaziland Tourism Authority invited Kaleidoscope on a media tour of what has become known as the Little Switzerland of Africa, the Kingdom of Swaziland. The Mantanga Waterfall is one of Swaziland's best known and most accessible waterfalls, as it can be seen within 50 meters.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. You can also be part of the Ebola discussion by calling us on +2 711 714 6843, 714 6847, 714 6857, and let us know which other stories you feel were not adequately covered by the media, or that stories that were not covered, or rather covered very, very well. Let's rather give credit where it is due. Now, our next story, leading charity has warned that a rate of 5 new Ebola cases an hour in Sierra Leone means healthcare demands are far outstripping supply.
West Africa is battling to fight the scourge of Ebola virus, with more than 3,000 people dead in what has become the world's worst ever Ebola outbreak. The affected countries do not have the resources or the public health infrastructure necessary to bring the outbreak under control, and massive external intervention is needed.
To isolate these countries, it makes the economic, social, and political situation worse to isolate these countries. Same thing with closing of the borders. And it's also clear that not only the United Nations, but NGOs and others need to get people in and out of these areas.
One of the immediate things which can be done is for airlines to resume their flights. The fact that we have 2 international airlines coming means that there are ways for airlines to come in safely. If that is the case for one, it must be the case for the next. And we really want to emphasize that. But beyond that, there has to be planning in terms of liquidity, support for small businesses, and a plan, a real focused plan on ensuring that beyond Ebola, there is economic recovery, so that Sierra Leone does not lose the benefits of the growth it's experienced over the last 10 years.
Well, I just want to hear from you first. At this stage, is our media finally giving Ebola the kind of exclusive coverage that it should be receiving? Tebogo?
Definitely. Our media is doing a very good job on a daily basis. If you look at various publications, you have an update about what's happening in terms of the situation in Sierra Leone and in Liberia. But there's a lack of now opinions around how do we deal with the issue. There's no analysis. So we're just reporting on the facts, but the analysis is lacking. And if you look at the situation, we need to start analyzing the consequences of Ebola. Because now as Africans, if you now travel to another country, somebody will be scared to shake your hand because they'll be scared that they might contract the Ebola disease. And we shouldn't wait for information to come from international media. We should start the conversations here so that we can demystify all of the misconceptions and educate our audience and audiences internationally about what Ebola really is.
All right, on the line, let's welcome Mr. Brooks Spector, who's giving us a bit of more insight into the Ebola. Mr. Spector, a very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Now, Mr. Spector, in terms of how the world media has responded on Ebola, please give us your views.
Well, I mean, part of it is, like everybody else, it wasn't entirely clear what it was they were covering, let alone how they were going to cover it. And what we need to be real clear about is that international media are spread very, very thinly on the ground in Africa. There's been a huge pullback over the last 15, 20 years for international coverage of reporters, correspondents on station in countries in Africa. I mean, just for example, the Washington Post's Africa Bureau consists basically of one full-time reporter, and he's based in Nairobi. So, I mean, that's a fair piece of territory to cover from one country on the eastern side of the continent. But give the newspapers and electronic media their due. This particular outbreak and this particular international health emergency was only first noted by the World Health Organization at the end of March of this year. So we're 6 months into it, and at the beginning they were talking in terms of tens and 20s worth of casualties rather than the much grimmer numbers that we see now. I looked at the Associated Press wire this morning thinking about this conversation, and one of the articles, there were several articles on Ebola, but one of them was particularly interesting, and it talked about how international news agencies, how they are covering the story rather than just the story itself. The way in which they determine who's going to go, the kinds of precautions they're taking with the personnel, even down to the level of what kinds of sanitary circumstances they carry out with their shoes and the instructions they get on eating and sitting and so forth in infected areas, partly because if you're a correspondent and if you're going from place to place and you're talking to people who necessarily have been exposed to it or even worse are treating it and or are suffering from it, you now have to be just as concerned about the spread of infection as if you were part of the medical personnel on station dealing with the crisis.
Let's go to Cape Town. Juanita, what do you think about the fact that, I just want to ask again, what makes the recent case of course, the U.S. cameraman that was infected with the Ebola virus, we're seeing that he's actually receiving quite a lot of media coverage in relation to all the other Ebola cases that made it to the media. What are your views in Cape Town, Juanita?
Yeah, it's quite the nature of media to focus in on one person that they think that people can identify with, or that they think that people would be interested in. So the hundreds and hundreds of Liberians who are sick with Ebola are not focused on it in the same way as one American camera person who happens to be a freelancer, because as was said, that's what the media houses are doing. They are sending in freelancers. Freelancers have much less of a choice in terms of work because, well, they need to work, so they tend to go into dangerous situations anyway. But I mean, the coverage, it really is the nature of the media to do that kind of coverage where they pick a person, it sounds a lot more exciting and more interesting, and I have to put those in air quotes. It sounds a lot more exciting and interesting to talk about one person being sick, and while working in Liberia, he became ill. The same goes for the person that traveled to America and is Liberian and became ill in the US and is now in critical condition. It's the nature of the media to want to focus in on one person because they feel like, maybe they feel like, the numbers are not something that they can translate into a story.
Thank you, Juanita. I mean, even the Liberian authorities are threatening to prosecute this guy when he actually comes back in the country. That's taken momentum over the actual issue, which is Ebola. Wellington.
Look, it's quite interesting, and let me agree with Tebogo here and also other speakers that media is focusing on those issues, right, at the expense of, for me, Ebola is not just a health issue. It's a food security issue, right? It's an economic issue because what's happening on the ground is that people are not doing their usual farming, right, because of what's happening. So those, to me, are the issues that we need to be going beyond what we're currently doing. Because at the moment, I mean, Tebogo is right. Media has covered it extensively, and I'm sure most of us know the causes, know what to do, how to prevent it. But beyond that, what is this? It's not just. It wasn't a West African issue. It's now a global issue. It's a global issue which goes beyond the health sector, beyond the health system to all other spheres of life. And those are the issues we should be interrogating.
Mr. Spector, just to get back to you now, on the local front, people have been pleading, of course, with the government to be very transparent and deliver factual reports. But is that all we really need for now, to wait, or rather to wait for a confirmed case before we take decisive action?
Well, no, I mean, if I understand your question, what people want and what people need to know and what people actually get, they're all three separate things. What people want is obviously for the disease to go away, or at best, or at worst, that their government or governments have figured out how to keep it at bay from them. But let's keep in mind, this is not something that you're going to stamp out permanently and make it go away. I mean, this is a disease that turns out to be endemic in Africa, in parts of the continent, and there will be new outbreaks in the coming years. This is the first time that there's been a major outbreak in West Africa, but it's not the first time the disease has been encountered. And I think one of your panel members has hit the nail on the head, that coverage going forward must now focus on the effects of the disease and the dislocations caused by the disease on the broader economic questions. I mean, I looked at today's New York Times, and there are stories on health workers coming in from all kinds of places, whether they're Cuban doctors or American military medical personnel and Médecins Sans Frontières, voluntary organization. So the immediate coverage is, at least in the quality newspapers and on international broadcast media, is good. CNN, for example, its medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, has been lobbying his organization to allow him to go and do reporting. I see a report saying he's been begging them to give him permission to go. Right. So there's the attention on the immediate issues are there. Let me just talk about one other thing for a second.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, sir, but thank you so much for your time and knowledge this morning.
Okay.
All right, of course, that is Mr. Brooks Spector. He's a U.S. diplomat to Africa and, of course, East Asia. Well, we're going to take a very quick ad break, and when we return, we're going to look at the media coverage of the Hong Kong protests and the Dalai Lama VISA saga. Share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, as well as on Facebook. Stay with us. This is Media Monitor.
Zoom into Africa. This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abu Samen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
Welcome back to +2711 714 6843 714 6847 6857, and you can give us a call on the stories that you think the media omitted this week. Let's take Kondile on the line. Kondile, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your comments, please, sir.
No, thanks, Alicia. Especially when it comes to breaking stories, it has been more on print. And I must indicate, Alicia, that there's been a lot of work that is done by even contradictions. For example, I know that there was a story that was led by SABC on the disconnection of electricity in South parts of Free State, and quickly print media, or the so-called expose. And some of the information changes from time to time, and it takes time for you to report on the work that it's done, particularly by radio, in terms of breaking stories.
All right, Kondile, thank you so much. That point is, of course, taken. We do consider stories from radio. People are protesting against the 65th anniversary of the communist rule in China. They want to be allowed to vote for any candidate of their choice.
It's a situation where the story is not being broken down and analyzed piece by piece. The issue of about Hong Kong wanting more autonomy, I don't think we're getting that. We're just hearing one side of the story. And that could also be because the Hong Kong government was very slow
in the local coverage is that they're almost like drawing those sort of like links between what happened in North Africa and then Hong Kong. But the issue, like Tebogo is saying for me is, how does...
On this issue. On the line, we're now joined by Professor Steven Friedman from the Center for the Study of Democracy to explain further the impact of Hong Kong protests?
Things have been closed, which obviously harms the economy. So there's a challenge for the Chinese because, and ironically, despite the fact that China is not a democracy, many people in Hong Kong hoped that China taking over would make the last couple of weeks is that students have taken to the street, supported by democracy campaigners, and they said, look, we now want a situation where we elect our leaders.
We received a written confirmation from the Dalai Lama that he has now decided to cancel his plans to travel to South Africa.
Taken this person and they have insulted him again. So, I mean, even with the last time where the Department of Home Affairs said as well that the...
Tebogo, your views?
It's a very complicated issue. I think we shouldn't simplify it because this is also a diplomatic issue. If you look at the political...
We've just heard from the international relations as well.
Yeah, I think that they weren't conflicting reports as much as...
So that at least as readers, as listeners, as media consumers, we know exactly where our country stands, like Tebogo was saying.
All right. Right, well, we're going to leave it there on by calling us on +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, and 714 6857. Not forgetting that, you can also ask our panel.
Working days, 4 to 7 working days. I waited 4 weeks, and which I had to kind of postpone my trip 3 times. Already. So I think...
For joining us, your comment, please, sir.
Thank you very much. I've watched the situation as this Dalai Lama debacle and
values about the Dalai Lama issue. When you just reported that he withdrew